What's up guys? Welcome back to another command block tutorial. Today's video we're going to be doing a much requested tutorial, and that is firebending. For this tutorial we have 4 different firebending based abilities for you guys to add to your own world. So let's do a quick look at what they are. The first of which is basically a simple throwable fireball. You basically throw it out and it's going to blow up and damage everything near it, as well as leave a ton of flame all over the ground. It's pretty simple, but also quite effective. The next up that we have is basically a flamethrower breath. So, whenever I'm holding this blaze powder and sneaking, I'm going to be doing this little flame breath particle chain in front of me, and I'm going to be placing flame all over the ground in front of me too. It's perfect for just devouring the entire world with fire. Now, that is the only 2 abilities for the primary firebending type, but we do have 2 subtypes of firebending as well. The first of which is lightning bending. So, what we'll do here is spawn a few of these guys. Whenever I activate this ability, I shoot forward a lightning that chains between enemies and does damage to all of them. It's really cool because it just chains between enemies and just looks like lightning and moves super fast. It's really effective. And the final type is probably the most unique sub-bending type of firebending, which is combustion bending. I believe that's what it's called. Correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, with this one, we get to shoot out this projectile that travels along, has these mini kind of sound explosions as it goes, and then detonates into a bigger one when it lands. So to show you this on some enemies too, it will detonate, of course, if it hits an enemy. It might have been too high. As you can see, it travels through the air, travels pretty far, and blows up at the end, creating a pretty large explosion. But yeah, these are the 4 abilities that you're going to be able to have access to as a firebender in Minecraft. Let's get into the commands. As you guys can see here, we have a decent amount of commands for this project. This was done on a live stream at the request of viewers. So if you guys are interested, you want to be part of the live stream and get to vote on what I actually make for my tutorials, go ahead and make sure you're subscribed with the notifications on to be able to see the live streams that I do and be able to vote in what I do. But let's get into it. Now, 2 of these abilities, the projectile based ones, which is the combustion bending and the lightning bending, they do both require scoreboards. So these command blocks that we have right here, these are the scoreboards you're going to need to do. You can type them in chat, or you can put them in an impulse command and then power it, such as putting a lightning rod on top of it and summoning lightning, and that will actually power your commands. You don't need to do that, but it's definitely the more fun way to do it. The other 2 abilities, which is the fireball and the flamethrower, do not require scoreboards. If scoreboards are something that scare you, you can just stick to those 2. And these are actually the 2 that we're going to start on. So the first of which is going to be this fireball. So what's actually happening here is that every time I hold magma and I sneak, we're going to throw a fireball, which is actually an invisible armor stand that is holding a magma block, and we're just going to basically have that be a projectile that lights things on fire when it lands. It's kind of complicated, but don't worry, I'll walk you through it. I'll show you all the commands for you to just copy and paste in your own world. So what we're actually doing, starting here, is we are checking for anything that has the tag FireB, and this is where it's important to note that you're only going to be able to firebend if you have the tag FireB. So players won't be able to do this just by picking up these items. They're going to have to be firebenders first with the tag fire and then capital B. And this is true for all of the commands going forth. So keep that in mind. Anyways, we're checking, does the firebender have magma in their main hands, and are they sneaking? If so, we're actually going to summon a boat 80 blocks up in the air. And you might be questioning why that is. Well, there's actually going to be a boat so far up that you really can't even see it, and that's actually going to be tracking the projectile. That way we can add proper gravity to it, because for some reason armor stands don't really go up and down. The next thing we're doing is more or less the same command, except we are giving this boat the tag fireball. This way we can actually not do it with any boat, but make sure we're using the right boat. Then we're going to give the player the tag throw. The reason we're giving them the tag throw is that we only want this to happen once every time the player sneaks. If we're throwing a fireball every single time, like 20 times a second, as long as the player is sneaking, it's going to look a little weird. This way it kind of waits for the player to unsneak before it does it again. So we're going to give them the tag throw. And then we're also going to remove the tag throw once they're no longer sneaking, which is what this command does. So that's how we're actually summoning in the boat. So let's get into a little bit of what the boat actually does. First thing that we're going to be doing is executing at the boat. If it doesn't have the tag Viz, which is short for visual, it's going to go ahead and summon an armor stand named Fireball Viz, which is basically the actual invisible armor stand that's going to be carrying the magma. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to tag the Fireball Viz. This way it only spawns one armor stand per boat, essentially. Next up, we're going to give the Fireball Viz invisibility, so that way you don't see the actual armor stand. Pretty simple. And the next thing that we're going to be doing is putting magma into the hand of the armor stand. This way it actually has something that you can see. Then we're going to be teleporting the armor stand relative to the boat. So this one is something you're going to want to copy exactly how you see it. You don't want to mess with the positionings, because this more or less makes it so the hand of the armor stand is exactly where the fireball is supposed to be. Next up, we're going to make it so that for the Fireball Viz, which is the armor stand, if there is no boat within 100 blocks, it's going to kill the armor stand. This just makes it so that it's not living past when it should be exploding. Pretty simple. And we're also going to do this on a conditional, which is just going to be killing the fireball. Next up, we're going to just simply do this animation. What this animation does is more or less make it so that the armor stand is actually way bigger. Of course, when an armor stand holds something in its hands, it's pretty small. It's only about the size of, well, I mean, you guys know how small that is. The animation scale makes the armor stand giant, and as a result, makes anything it's holding giant, which is how we get such a big block as we're throwing it. And of course, if you guys are good with commands, you can actually copy this system to more or less make block entities with any command type. So keep that in mind for your future projects. But that's how we're doing the visuals. Let's get into the actual mechanics of how this fireball is working. What we're doing is we are checking if the block air, so if basically the fireball is in air, like 80 blocks below it, if that's the case, it's just going to teleport itself forward. It's going to teleport itself forward 1.1 blocks. If you want to make this travel faster, make this number higher. If you want to make it slower, make this number lower. I don't recommend making it much higher than 1 though. And then this is a gravity command. So basically this is making it so every time it travels, it looks slightly more downwards. So it's looking 50 blocks in front of it and 1 block down. So if you want to make it so the gravity is less, you actually want to make this number higher. If I make it 90 instead of 50, you can see it travels much farther before it's affected by gravity as much. So just keep that in mind. And if you want to make it so for whatever reason you want the gravity to be higher, you can make this number lower. And as you can see, the block falls much quicker. So that's how you guys can affect the gravity. I like it at 50, but you guys can make it whatever you want. The next thing is we're just going to make sure that the fireball is teleporting itself in the same spot. This way there's nothing weird where it's just moving or getting moved by something or affected by gravity if for some reason it's not teleporting forward. That's all. Next up, we're going to make it so that if the fireball is not touching air, so if where the fireball is no longer air, then it's going to add the tag boom. This is how it's going to know to basically explode. And of course, we're also going to be, nope, that's the same command. And of course, we're also going to be making it so that if the fireball comes into contact with a mob, with an enemy, you also want it to explode. You don't want to just go through the mob. That wouldn't make much sense. That's what this command right here does. And now we're going to get into what the actual explosion does. Simply put, the first one is just a particle command. And keep in mind that, just a reminder for all of these commands, we're actually going 80 blocks down, because if you remember, the actual projectile is 80 blocks above us, and it's a boat. So just keep that in mind. Next up, we're going to be doing the play sounds, just simple particle explosion. Then we're going to be doing a camera shake. So if the players are in range with the fireball, their camera's going to shake. It makes the explosion feel a lot more impactful. Then we're going to do the damage. This is going to make it so whenever the fireball impacts, it does a burst damage. And of course, you can make this number higher or lower, whatever you want. This number right here, the 10, is how much damage it does. If you want to do more damage, make it as high as you want or as low as you want. That's up to you. The R equals 5 right here is the range of the explosion. So basically, any mob within 5 blocks at the center of the explosion is going to be hit. If you want to increase this range or decrease this range, feel free to change this number. The rest, however, I recommend you pretty much keep the same. Then of course, because it's a fireball, we want it to place fire. What we're doing here is more or less just that. We're placing fire in an area that is basically 3 blocks in each direction of the center of the fireball. And we're doing keep. This means it's not going to be replacing any existing blocks. It's just going to be placing fire on top of the blocks that are already there. Pretty simple. And then of course, when all this is done, we want to get rid of the fireball, so we just kill it right here. That's what this is. And that's all the commands for the fireball. And of course, once you do all that, and you have the firebending tag, you can throw as many fireballs as you want just by holding magma and just looking around, basically. It's really fun and pretty effective against mobs of all types, especially if you pump up the damage number a bit. But that's it for the fireball. Let's get into the next one, which is of course the flamethrower. Now, that is a quite effective weapon, and there is one little thing that I did not show, and I should mention that this was because I did this on stream, and this was something that players requested. If you use the flamethrower while you have wheat in your inventory, it's going to bake it into bread. You don't have to include this, and I will show you the commands that make this optional, but this was something that was requested when I was making this on the live stream, so just so you guys know. Anyways, all we're really doing here is making it so that we're checking for the firebender, we're checking if they have blaze powder in their hand, and we're checking if they're sneaking. That's what this command does right here. If that's the case, then we're going to play the gas fireball sounds with these parameters. Should also mention this is on a 2-tick delay, and the rest of these are of course chained off this one. The first thing that we're going to basically be doing is checking once again, is it a firebender holding blaze powder in their main hand and they're sneaking? If so, we're going to basically have this mob flame in front of their face. That's what this arrow 2 means, 2 blocks in front of wherever I'm looking. And then we just copy that a couple of times. We do the same command, literally exactly the same command, except we have 3 here. Same commands except with 4. Same command except with 5, and I believe there's one more. Yes, the same command except with 6. Now we're going to get into basically the next set of commands. What we're doing is we're checking 4 blocks in front of the player here. It's exactly the same, firebender, blaze powder in their main hand, and they're sneaking. This time we're going 4 blocks out in front of where I'm looking, and we are damaging anything within 3 block radius of that with 10 fire damage based on myself, basically. So once again, if you want to change the damage number, feel free to adjust this number as high or as low as you want. I wouldn't recommend changing the range of this unless you also increase how far out from the player it's going to be, or else you're going to hurt yourself, which is not good, generally not good. Similar to this is more or less the same commands. Once again, checking firebender, blaze powder, main hand, sneaking, 5 blocks in front of the player this time instead of 4. And we're just going to do a little bit of a fill command. So within 2 blocks of the center in every direction, we're going to place fire keep. This is what's placing the fire on the ground. Pretty simple. And these next 2 commands, the toaster ones, they're entirely optional. This is, like I said, based on stream, but I'll show you them anyways. First thing that we're going to be checking is all the same stuff, but we're now going to be checking, does the player have wheat? If so, then we are going to give the player bread. And similarly, if they're holding it and they have wheat and they're sneaking, then it's just going to clear one of their wheats. That way the wheat is getting consumed as it's giving you bread. These last 2 are optional. I imagine most of you won't do it, but like I said, this is for stream. Remember, subscribe if you're interested in joining these streams. They're quite fun. Alright, those are it for the main bender types, so let's get into the 2 sub-bending types. So if you remember, the first one that we have is, of course, lightning bending. And the really cool thing is, at least in my opinion, is that it chains between targets multiple times. Even if we have, let's say, a higher health target like a Ravager, it's going to chain between these guys multiple times. It's not just going to damage the same one multiple times over. And the way that we're actually doing this is we're making it so that every time it does damage, it also has a little timer. So if I can actually show you the bolt timer that we have on the side of the screen here, if I place these 2 Ravagers, you're going to see that each time they get hit, they temporarily get a really fast moving scoreboard. This just makes it so for basically a couple fractions of a second, they're actually completely immune to the lightning, and it's not going to target them anymore. This is what makes it so the bolt can actually chain between different enemies, which I think is probably one of its coolest features. So yes, you'll have to use scoreboards, but don't worry, if you guys copy everything exactly how I show you it, you won't have any issues. The first and most important thing is we make this scoreboard right here. Just type this into your chat bar, or you can type it into an impulse command and power it. You don't have to summon it with a lightning rod and lightning bolt, but if you want to, you can. Otherwise, it's just power with redstone, it doesn't matter. All we're doing, though, is we're going to start off by actually summoning in the bolt. Pretty simple, we're checking, is the player a firebender, but this time do they have a lightning rod in their hands. Keep in mind, you can change this to any item you want. I'll use lightning rod because it's lightning in the name, but make it whatever you want. Anyways, all we're doing is summoning an armor stand and naming it bolt. Next to this, we're going to be doing exactly the same thing that we did with fireball, except instead of throw, we're doing throw L, so we can differentiate between this and the fireball, and we're just giving the player the tag throw L. That way, once they've thrown lightning, it's only going to do it once per time the player sneaks. And this is basically making it so that the player is no longer sneaking, just remove the tag throw L. And of course, we just want to make the armor stand invisible, because we don't want to see it, we want to see the particles. That's it for actually summoning it. Now we're going to get into the actual mechanics of how it works. So, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add to the bolt timer a bolt timer of 1. So the armor stand, because we don't want it to last forever, even when there's no targets around, you'll see that it's adding on the right side of the screen to the bolt timer. Once it hits a certain number, at 10, it's going to die. We simply have this so it doesn't live forever, because otherwise you can have armor stands and lag, and that's not fun. So what we're doing is just add anything bolt, add the timer, the following commands, we just kill it. Should also mention that this is on a 10-tick delay. But if you guys want to extend how long this lasts, make this number higher. If you want to make it last shorter, make this number lower. Pretty simple. Next up, we're going to add the actual particle. All we're simply doing is, at the bolt, just summon in the electric spark particle 1 block up so it looks a little bit better. Pretty simple stuff. Next thing that we're going to be doing is the actual teleportation stuff. This is where stuff gets a little bit more complicated. We're going at the armor stands. It's going to teleport itself forward half a block. It's going to be facing the nearest mob, so that way it's going to be like a player or a mob, like a husk or a zombie or something like that, that has a bolt timer of 0. And this is going to be so it's not hitting the same enemy multiple times, but it zigzags between enemies. We're going to make sure it's not another firebender, and we're going to make sure it's not named bolt, otherwise it's going to attack itself. Next up, we're going to do the actual damage. This is more or less pretty similar command, we're just executing at the bolt. We're going to damage whatever the closest mob is within a 1 block radius that has a bolt timer of 0 and is not named bolt, so it's not itself, and then we're going to do 20 lightning damage. Now, as with all the other damage commands that we've shown so far, you can increase this number for more damage, or decrease it for less. It's entirely up to you. Next, what we're going to be doing is making it so that every time the bolt hits an enemy, it's going to add a bolt timer to it. This just makes it so every time the player, the mob, the target, whatever it is, gets hit by the bolt, there's going to be a brief period where it's actually immune for the bolt. This makes it so that the bolts can actually target other mobs and then chain back to it eventually. That's what we're doing here, we're giving it a bolt timer of 10. And then we just repeat. So that's actually all we're doing for this whole thing. We have the particle, we have the teleport, we have the damage, and we have the timer. Then, because if you look here at the teleport real quick, we're only moving half a block. That's pretty slow, but if we move any more blocks at a time, there's the chance that the bolt can actually skip over mobs, and we don't want it to do that. So what we do is we just literally repeat. So we have the particle, the TP, the damage, and the bolt timer. Just to show you, we repeat one more time. I'll show you the actual commands. Particle, the TP, the damage, and of course the bolt timer. It is literally the exact same commands. Just show you one more time. Particle, teleport, damage, timer. Particle, teleport, damage, timer. Particle, teleport, damage, timer. Nobody edit that and make that into like a music editor or anything, by the way. Don't do it. Anyways, a couple more commands and then we're wrapped up with lightning bolt. First of these is we're going to be removing a bolt timer from everything that has a bolt timer that's not equal to 0. What we're doing here, and I should mention that this is on a 0-tick delay, is anything that has a bolt timer, so basically any target that's been hit by the bolt, we're going to remove the bolt timer. This makes it so after a short time, it's ready to be hit by the bolt again. The next thing that we're going to be doing is adding a bolt timer of 0. Now you might be thinking, well, why are we doing that? Well, before we do this, every mob in the game is just going to not have a bolt timer. It's not that it's going to have a bolt timer of 0, it's just going to not have one. And if you guys remember here in the teleport commands, it requires something with a bolt timer of 0. So in order to make sure it's able to target all the mobs that we wanted to, we actually have to go through and give it a bolt timer of 0. All this is doing is adding 0, which means the number's not going to change if it already has a number, but this way it's going to have a number to be targeted. If that doesn't make sense, I'm sorry, just follow it what you see here, that's all. And finally, we're just going to give a play sound to the bolt, so we're using random.fizz with these parameters, pretty simple stuff. And I believe this is on a 5-tick delay. And that is it for being a lightning bender. The final ability is, of course, the combustion bending, which I just quite like how this looks. It does remind me a lot of the show, where he kind of has this mini explosions as it travels out, and then like the bigger explosion at the end. I just think it looks really cool. It reminds me a lot of the show, so I hope you guys enjoy it too. Now, similar, of course, to the bolt, we also have a timer here. So we're using comb timer, just short for combustion timer. That's all we're doing. Once again, power this command or type it in chat. It doesn't matter. But let's switch to the display real quick. And through the magic of editing, it's already there. Right. Pretty similar to the bolt timer, we're actually going to do more or less the same thing. We're checking, is there an ender eye in their main hands? If so, and they don't have the tag throw C, we're changing the tag again. We're just going to spawn the armor stand, and we're going to name it comb, short for combustion. You will notice the armor stand summoning is a little bit different here in terms of order. In the last one, we just had the bolt, and we didn't even have these squiggly coordinates. The way we're doing it this time, the reason we're doing it this way is it actually makes it so that the armor stand copies the rotation of the player. We don't have to do anything else to make sure it's facing the right direction. The next thing that we're going to be doing is adding the tag throw C to the player. Pretty simple, pretty much the same thing we did for the bolt timer. And then of course, the player's no longer sneaking, we're going to remove the tag. Once again, pretty simple stuff. And finally, we're going to make it invisible. Exactly the same. There's not even a difference for the summoning other than the name and the tags. Anyways, let's get into the next set of commands. Similar to the bolt timer, we don't want it to go on forever. So we're going to be doing on a 10-tick delay, we're just going to add comb timer of 1. And then we're going to give it the tag boom. So instead of just killing it outright, we're going to make it so at the end of its little duration, it's going to get the tag boom, which makes it explode. Similarly to the lightning bolt, if you're going to make this last longer, make this number higher. If you're going to make it shorter, make it a lower number. It's up to you guys. So the next thing we're going to be doing is teleport again. Simply have the comb teleport itself 1 block forward. That's all it is. Now we're going to get into some more checking for the boom. Basically, we're going to be checking at the comb. If there is a mob within 2 blocks that's not an armor stance, it's going to add the tag boom. Basically, if it hits the target, it's going to get ready to blow up. Similarly, it's going to check if the boom, or if the comb, the armor stand, is not in air, it's in some block other than air, it's also going to get the tag boom and be ready to blow up. And these are just the particles right here. So as it's traveling along, it's going to have the balloon gas particle. This is the main line particle that you see as it's traveling. Second particle, this is on a 10-tick delay, so it's not happening all the time, is a mini explosion that you see as it goes along. And of course, as it does that little mini explosion, it plays a mini explosion sound. So this is just the chain command with a 0-tick delay. So this is, as you guys can see, you have the main particle, we have the mini explosions, and then of course the explosion sound as it travels along. Pretty simple. The final aspect of this creation is of course the actual explosion on impact. What we're doing here is we're going to basically say if it has the tag boom, so once it's ready to explode, we're going to use the knockback roar particle. Next up, we're going to play an explosion sound. Next up, we're going to give a camera shake to any player in range. Next, we're going to do the actual damage, and once again, this is pretty easy to adjust. If you want the explosion to have a bigger radius or a smaller radius, just make this number bigger or smaller. If you want to do more damage or less damage, go ahead and make this number bigger or smaller. Pretty simple. And finally, we're just going to make it so that after it explodes, it dies, and it doesn't just keep exploding for no reason. That would be weird, I feel like. But that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed this little command block creation of how to become a firebender with 4 different firebending abilities, including 2, which of course are subtypes of lightning bending and combustion bending. And if you guys liked it, make sure to let me know. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. But as I always say, please join the Discord instead because you're going to get help a lot easier. The link for the Discord is going to be in the description. And once more, just a final reiteration, if you guys would like to have a vote in the kind of stuff that I make, feel free to subscribe with your notifications on to make sure that you catch my streams, as I don't often schedule them ahead of time. That way you guys can actually have a vote and a say in what I make for the next tutorials. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and bye.